I spent 30 years as a United States Postal Inspector. That might not sound impressive to most people. They hear postal and they think mailman. Blue uniform, letters and packages, nothing special. But postal inspectors are federal law enforcement. We investigate mail fraud, identity theft, financial crimes. I spent 3 decades tracking down con artists, fraudsters, and thieves. Men who ran Ponzi schemes, women who stole millions through fake charities, criminals who thought they were smarter than everyone else. I put over 60 of them behind bars. I thought I could spot a liar from a mile away, thought I knew every trick in the book, thought nobody could fool Walter Chambers. Turns out I was wrong. Because the one liar I couldn't see, he was sitting at my own dinner table, eating my food, calling me Dad. And for 10 years, I believed every word that came out of his mouth. My son Richard fooled me completely. He made me believe terrible things about his brother, made me push away the one son who actually loved me, made me waste a decade treating Tommy like a criminal when the real criminal was wearing a $3,000 suit and driving a Mercedes. But when I finally saw through him, when I finally recognized the con for what it was, well, let's just say I remembered how to do my job. My name is Walter Chambers. Most people call me Walt. I'm 72 years old, and this is the story of how my golden child tried to steal everything I had, and how I made him regret it. I need to tell you about the beach house first, because that's what this is really about. Not just money, though there's plenty of that involved. It's about the house, what it means, who it belongs to. My wife Helen fell in love with that house in 1987. We were driving down the coast of North Carolina, just the two of us. The boys were staying with her parents for the weekend. It was our 10th anniversary, and I'd promised her a trip. Nothing fancy. We didn't have money for fancy back then. Just a couple of nights in a motel, some dinners on the water, and time together. We were driving past Ocean View when she suddenly grabbed my arm. "Walt, pull over. Look at that." It was a beach house. Not a mansion, just a simple 2-story cottage with a wraparound porch and a clear view of the ocean. There was a for sale sign out front, weathered and faded like it had been there for years. Helen was out of the car before I even turned off the engine. She walked around that house like she was walking through a dream, touched the porch railings, looked out at the water, and when she turned back to me, she had tears in her eyes. "This is it, Walt. This is home." I told her we couldn't afford it. She told me to find a way. So I did. I worked overtime for 2 years straight, took extra shifts, skipped lunches, and in 1989, I handed Helen the keys to that house for her birthday. I'll never forget the look on her face, like I'd given her the whole world. I spent every summer there, every holiday we could manage. I laid every board on that deck myself, painted every room, fixed every leak. And when I retired in 2015, we moved there full-time. Just me and Helen watching the sunrise every morning from that porch. She loved those sunrises. 4 years ago, March 12, 2021, we were sitting on that porch together, coffee in hand, sun coming up over the water. Helen turned to me and smiled. 34 years, and I still love this view, she said. 2 hours later, she collapsed in the kitchen. The doctor said it was a massive stroke, nothing anyone could have done. She was gone before the ambulance even arrived. I held her hand until they made me let go. Now, I need to tell you about my sons, because this story doesn't make sense without understanding who they are, who they became. Richard is my firstborn, born in 1976. Smart kid, ambitious, always looking ahead, always reaching for the next thing. He got into Duke on a scholarship, first person in our family to go to an Ivy League school. Got his MBA, became an investment banker in Charlotte. Corner office, big salary, the whole package. I was proud of him. Lord knows I was proud. But Richard was always different. He didn't come home much after college. Christmas every few years, maybe a long weekend here and there. He'd call sometimes, but the calls always felt like he was checking off a box. Call Dad, done, next task. Tommy was different. Tommy was born in 1980, 4 years younger than Richard. He wasn't a straight A student, didn't go to some fancy university. He went to community college, learned to work on boat engines, and started his own repair business right there in Ocean View. Richard looked down on him. I could see it. The way he'd say, "Tommy's still fixing boats, huh?" Like it was beneath him. Like honest work with your hands was something to be ashamed of. But Tommy never cared. He loved the ocean, loved the work, and he never left. He lived 10 minutes from the beach house, came over for Sunday dinners, drove me the doctor's appointments after Helen passed, fixed things around the house when they broke. For a long time, I thought that was the whole picture. Richard was the success. Tommy was the one who stayed behind. Both my sons, each in their own way. But here's the thing, and this is important. About 10 years ago, Richard started calling more often. At first, I was glad. Thought maybe he was finally coming around. Maybe Helen's influence was softening him. Maybe he realized family mattered. But the calls were always about the same thing. Tommy. "Dad, I'm worried about Tommy. Have you noticed how he's always at the house? Dad, did Tommy ask you for money again? Because I heard he's been struggling. Dad, you need to be careful. I hate to say this, but I think Tommy might be taking advantage of you." At first, I pushed back, told Richard he was wrong. Tommy never asked me for money, never once. But Richard was persistent. Every call, another comment, another concern, another seed of doubt. "I'm not saying Tommy's a bad person, Dad. I'm just saying you need to protect yourself. You're not getting younger. And the house, the savings, that's a lot of money. People change when there's money involved, even family." Slowly, so slowly, I didn't even notice it happening. I started to believe him. I started watching Tommy differently. Every time he came over, I'd wonder, is he here because he loves me or because he's waiting for me to die? Every time he fixed something around the house, I'd think, is he being helpful or is he making himself indispensable so I'll put him in the will? Richard's voice was in my head even when he wasn't around. And eventually, I did something I'll regret for the rest of my life. I pulled away from Tommy. I started making comments about him getting a real job. I stopped inviting him to Sunday dinners. When he called, I kept the conversations short. When he offered to help with something, I told him I could handle it myself. I treated my own son like a suspect, like someone I had to protect myself from. And Tommy, he didn't fight back. He didn't defend himself. He just faded away, stopped calling as much, stopped coming over. The distance grew and grew until we barely spoke at all. I broke my son's heart because I believed his brother's lies. Helen passed away in 2021. For the next 3 years, it was just me in that beach house. Richard called every few weeks, more than he used to actually, asking about my health, asking about my plans, asking if the house was too much for me to handle alone. I didn't think much of it at the time. But 8 months ago, something happened. Richard came down for what he called Helen's anniversary, stayed for a long weekend, was more attentive than usual, brought me groceries, helped me organize some paperwork, even sat with me on the porch and watched the sunrise one morning. I thought maybe I'd been too hard on him. Maybe he was finally becoming the son I always hoped he'd be. Then he left,
and I found something he left behind. It was in the guest room, on the dresser. A folder, nothing special, probably fell out of his bag when he was packing. I almost just set it aside to mail to him later, but something made me open it. Inside were printouts, bank statements, my bank statements, property tax records, my property tax records, a real estate listing showing comparable properties in Ocean View, all of them worth over $1 million. And at the bottom of the stack, a legal article. The title stopped me cold. How to Obtain Conservatorship Over an Elderly Parent, a step-by-step guide. I stood there in that guest room, holding that folder, and I felt like the ground was shifting under my feet. Everything I thought I knew about my sons, about who was loyal and who was a threat, started to crack apart.
But I didn't confront Richard. I didn't call him and demand an explanation. Instead, I did what I was trained to do. I started an investigation. Because if there's one thing 30 years in federal law enforcement taught me, it's this: never tip off the suspect before you have all the evidence. And if my son was running a con on his own father, I was going to make sure I caught him red-handed. The next morning, I did what I'd done 1,000 times during my career. I started building a case. First, I went to the bank, not to make a withdrawal, to request records. 30 years of federal credentials might be retired, but the people at First Coastal Credit Union still knew me, knew I wasn't the kind of man who asked questions without a reason. "Mr. Chambers," the branch manager said, pulling up my account on her screen, "what exactly are you looking for?" "Withdrawals," I said, "large ones, over the past 5 years." She printed out the statements. I took them home and spread them across my kitchen table. What I found made my hands shake. $73,000. Over 5 years, someone had made 17 separate withdrawals from my savings account. Amounts ranging from $2,000 to $8,000 each. All of them with my signature on the withdrawal slips. Except I hadn't signed them. I pulled out my reading glasses and examined each signature carefully. They were close, I'll give Richard that. He'd practiced. But 30 years of analyzing forged documents teaches you things. The pressure was wrong on the R. The loop on the W was too tight. Small differences that most people would never notice. But I noticed. I cross-referenced the dates with my calendar. Every single withdrawal happened during one of Richard's visits. Every single one. My son had been stealing from me for 5 years, and I'd been too busy suspecting Tommy to see it. But that wasn't all. Remember I mentioned Richard left his laptop at the house once? That was about a year ago. He'd driven halfway back to Charlotte before he realized and called me in a panic. "Dad, don't touch it. Just leave it on the desk. I'll send someone to pick it up tomorrow." At the time, I thought it was strange. Why would he care if I touched it? I wasn't going to snoop through his things. But now I had a reason. I still had the laptop. Richard had bought himself a new one and told me to just throw the old one away. But I never throw away electronics. Too many years of seeing criminals get caught through their hard drives. I opened it up. The battery was dead, but the charger still worked. And when the screen came to life, I saw that Richard had never logged out of his email. I spent the next 4 hours reading. Most of it was work stuff, investment reports, client meetings, nothing interesting. But then I found a folder labeled Family Planning. It wasn't about having children. The first email was from Vicky to Richard, dated March 2024.
Did you get the property assessment? The house should be worth at least $1.2 million in this market. Once we get POA, we can list it by summer. Working on it. Dad's getting more forgetful. Perfect timing. Just need to keep Tommy away so he doesn't interfere. I felt sick. There were dozens more. Plans to find a doctor who would sign off on cognitive decline. Research on assisted living facilities. Not because they cared about my well-being, but because once he's in a facility, we have full control of assets. And then I found the one that hit me hardest. Vicky, what about Tommy? Isn't he going to fight this? Richard, Tommy's not a problem. I've been working on Dad for years. He thinks Tommy's a deadbeat who's just waiting for him to die. Trust me, Dad won't believe a word Tommy says. I made sure of that. 10 years. 10 years of phone calls and comments and carefully planted doubts. 10 years of turning me against my own son. And I fell for every word. Now, I need to stop here and explain something. I'm not a man who cries easily. 30 years of federal law enforcement, you see things. You learn to keep your emotions in check. But sitting at that kitchen table, reading those emails, I felt something break inside me. I thought about Tommy. I thought about the Sunday dinners I'd stopped inviting him to, the phone calls I'd cut short, the way I'd looked at him with suspicion when all he'd ever done was love me. I thought about the look on his face the last time I'd really talked to him, 2 years ago. He'd come by to help me fix a leak in the roof, and I'd said something cruel, something Richard had planted in my head. You know, Tommy, I'm not going to be around forever, and when I'm gone, this house goes to whoever I decide deserves it, not whoever shows up the most. The hurt in his eyes, the way he just nodded and finished the repair without saying another word, the way he'd stopped coming by after that. I did that. Not Richard, me. I believed the lies, and I broke my son's heart. That night, I went out to the porch. Helen's chair was still there. I'd never moved it. Sometimes, when the sunset hit just right, I could almost see her sitting in it, almost hear her voice. Helen, I said to the empty chair, I failed them. I failed you. The waves crashed against the shore, the only answer I ever got anymore. You asked me to take care of both our boys, both of them, and I let Richard turn me against Tommy. I believed every lie. I pushed away the one son who actually stayed. I wiped my eyes with the back of my hand. Tommy never asked me for a dime, not once. And Richard's been stealing from me for years, forging my signature, planning to put me in a home and sell your house. I stared out at the water, dark now, stars coming out. I don't know if I can fix this. I don't know if Tommy will even talk to me. But I'm going to try, Helen. I owe him that much. I owe you that much.
The wind picked up, just for a moment. And I swear, I know it sounds crazy, but I swear I felt her hand on my shoulder. Okay, I said. Okay, I'll make it right. The next morning, I made 2 phone calls. The first was to Frank Delgado. Frank was my partner for 15 years at the Postal Inspection Service. Best investigator I ever worked with. Retired the same year I did. We still talked every few months, grabbed lunch when we could. Frank, I said when he picked up, I need your help. I told him everything. The folder, the forged signatures, the emails, the 10 years of manipulation. Frank was quiet for a long moment. So, what are you going to do? He finally asked. What we always did. Build a case, set a trap, and wait for them to walk into it. What about Tommy? I went quiet. That's the hard part, I said. I owe that boy an apology, a real one. But before I can make things right, I need to know how deep this goes. I need to know everything Richard's done. And then I'm going to give my son exactly what he deserves. The second call was harder. I sat with the phone in my hand for 20 minutes before I finally dialed. Tommy answered on the 3rd ring. His voice was cautious, guarded. The voice of a son who'd been pushed away too many times. Dad? Tommy, I need to see you. Silence. Why? So you can tell me again how I'm not good enough? How I'm just waiting for you to die so I can get the house? I deserved that, every word. "No, son. I need to see you so I can apologize." More silence, longer this time. Apologize for what? For everything. For believing Richard. For pushing you away. For 10 years of treating you like a criminal when you were the only one who actually gave a damn about me. I heard him breathing on the other end, processing. "What changed?" he asked. "What made you suddenly see the truth?" I found something. Something Richard left behind. Evidence of what he's really been doing. I paused. "You were right about him, Tommy. You were always right. And I was too blind to see it." Another long pause. "The beach house?" Tommy finally asked. "Tomorrow. Tomorrow. 10 o'clock. I'll tell you everything." Tommy showed up at 9:45. I watched him walk up the porch steps, the same steps he'd helped me repair a dozen times over the years. He looked older than I remembered, tired. The kind of tired that comes from carrying hurt for too long. I met him at the door. "Tommy, just show me," he said. "Whatever you found, show me." So I did. I spread everything out on the kitchen table. The bank statements with the forged signatures, the conservatorship research, the emails between Richard and Vicky, all of it. Tommy read through it in silence. His jaw tightened more with every page. When he got to the email, "I've been working on Dad for years. He thinks Tommy's a deadbeat. I made sure of that." He stopped. He looked at me.
And I saw everything in his eyes. The years of hurt, the confusion, the wondering what he'd done wrong. "I knew, Dad," he said quietly. "I always knew what Richard was doing, the things he was saying about me. He shook his head. "I didn't think you'd believe him over me, your own son." "I should have trusted you," my voice cracked. "You're my son, and I let your brother poison me against you. I'm sorry, Tommy. I'm so sorry." For a long moment, neither of us moved. Then Tommy nodded slowly. "Okay, Dad." His voice was thick. "Okay." I put my hand on his shoulder. He didn't pull away. "I'm going to make this right," I said. "All of it, but I need your help." "What do you need?" "Richard's been pushing for a family meeting. Says he wants to discuss my care needs. He's bringing some assisted living specialist. He thinks he's about to close the deal." Tommy's eyes narrowed. "When?" "I'm going to tell him next Sunday, here at the house." "And what's really going to happen?" I smiled. The same smile I used to get right before we took down a suspect. "He's going to find out what happens when you try to con a federal investigator." 3 days later, Tommy and I sat across from Patricia Webb in her law office. Patricia had been my attorney for 20 years, sharp as a tack. She looked through the evidence slowly, methodically, the same way I would have. When she finished, she set down the folder and looked at me. "Mr. Chambers, this is textbook elder financial abuse, forgery, fraud, attempted exploitation of a vulnerable adult. Your son could face felony charges." Good. The emails alone would be enough for a civil case, but combined with the forged bank records, she shook his head. "This is an airtight case. He won't be able to explain any of this away." "What about the power of attorney he's been trying to get?" "Fraudulent from the start. I'll have it invalidated within a week." She paused. "We should also talk about protecting your assets going forward. The beach house, your savings. Make sure he can never touch any of it, even if he somehow avoids criminal charges." I looked at Tommy. "The house goes to him," I said, "when I'm gone. My son, Tommy, the way Helen would have wanted." Tommy started to protest, but I held up my hand. "I wasted 10 years pushing you away. I'm not wasting another day." Patricia nodded and made a note. "One more thing," I said. "The meeting Sunday. I want you on speakerphone, as a witness." "I can do that. And I'm inviting Frank Delgado, my old partner, and Charlie Henderson, my neighbor.
I want witnesses who can testify to everything Richard says." Patricia smiled slightly. "Setting up a sting operation, Mr. Chambers?" "Old habits," I said. Tommy shook his head, but he was almost smiling. "Richard has no idea what's coming, does he?" "No," I said. "He thinks I'm just a senile old man who can't tell what's happening in his own house. He forgot one thing." "What's that?"
I spent 30 years putting men like him in prison. He's not going to con me. He's going to find out exactly what happens when you try. I looked out the window at the Carolina sky. Sunday was coming, and Richard was going to learn that the old man he'd been underestimating all these years still knew how to catch a criminal. Sunday, November 23rd, 2025. I woke up at 5 in the morning. Old habit, couldn't sleep anyway. I made coffee and sat on the porch, watching the sky slowly turn from black to deep blue to orange. The same view Helen loved, the same view I'd protect with everything I had. Today was the day. I'd spent the last week going over every detail. The evidence was organized. The witnesses were ready. Patricia Webb was standing by on her phone. Frank Delgado had driven down from Raleigh the night before. He was staying at Charlie Henderson's place, so Richard wouldn't see his car. Everything was in position. Richard thought he was coming to close the deal, to finally convince his senile old father to sign over control, to walk away with the house, the savings, everything Helen and I had built. He had no idea he was walking into a trap. They arrived at 2 o'clock. I watched from the living room window as the Mercedes pulled into the driveway. Richard stepped out first, adjusting his tie, smoothing down his suit jacket. Always had to look the part. Vicky emerged from the passenger side in a dress that probably cost more than Tommy made in a week. She was carrying a leather folder, brochures no doubt. Pictures of sunny assisted living facilities with smiling elderly people playing shuffleboard. And behind them, a third car. A woman in a gray pantsuit stepped out, carrying a briefcase. The senior care specialist Richard had mentioned. Probably some consultant he'd hired to make everything seem official. I took a deep breath. Showtime. I opened the front door before they could knock. "Richard, Vicky, come in, come in." Richard's smile was wide and warm, practiced, the same smile he'd used on clients for 25 years. "Dad, you look great, really great. This is Sandra Chen. She's a specialist in senior living transitions. I thought she could answer any questions you might have." "Of course, please, everyone sit down." They filed into the living room. Richard took the armchair closest to me, positioning himself as the authority figure. Vicky and Sandra sat on the couch. They didn't notice the slight shuffle in the kitchen, didn't notice that the back door had opened and closed a few minutes before they arrived. "Can I get anyone coffee?" I asked. "Water?" "We're fine, Dad." Richard waved his hand dismissively. "Let's just talk." I settled into my chair. Helen's chair was empty beside me, as always. "All right, talk." Richard leaned forward, his elbows on his knees, his expression carefully arranged into concern. Dad, I've been worried about you. We all have. Living out here alone, it's a lot. The house is beautiful, but it's a lot of work for one person. And I've noticed some things lately. Small things, but they add up. What kind of things? You seem confused sometimes, forgetful. Remember last month when you called me twice in the same day asking the same question? I didn't remember that, because it never happened. And the house, Richard continued, it's starting to show wear. The deck needs work. The roof probably needs to be looked at. It's a lot of money to maintain a property like this, money that could be better spent on your care. Vicky nodded along, right on cue. We've found some wonderful communities, she said, her voice sweet as poison. Beautiful places, ocean views, round-the-clock staff.
You wouldn't have to worry about anything." Sandra Chen opened her briefcase and pulled out a glossy brochure. "Sunrise Shores is one of the finest memory care facilities on the coast," she said. "Starting at just $8,500 a month, residents receive—" "Memory care?" I interrupted. Richard jumped in quickly. "It's just a term, Dad. It doesn't mean anything. These places cater to all kinds of people. The point is, you'd be taken care of. You wouldn't be alone." I nodded slowly, playing my part. "And the house?" Richard and Vicky exchanged a glance. Here it came. "Well," Richard said carefully, "if you were living somewhere more manageable, you wouldn't need the house anymore. We could sell it, use the proceeds to pay for your care, set up a trust, make sure everything is handled properly." "A trust that you would control?" "Someone has to manage these things, Dad. You can't be expected to handle finances at your age. Not with," he paused, choosing his words, "not with everything that's going on." He reached into his jacket and pulled out a document, slid it across the coffee table toward me. "I had our lawyers draw this up. It's a power of attorney. It just gives me the legal ability to help you with financial decisions. Nothing changes day to day. It's just protection for you." I looked down at the document. Power of attorney. The same form I'd found in that folder 8 months ago. "You want me to sign this?" "I think it's the smart thing to do, Dad. The responsible thing." I picked up the pen he'd set beside the document. Richard's eyes lit up. Vicky sat forward slightly. Sandra Chen smiled. They thought they'd won. I set the pen back down. "You know, Richard, I've been thinking a lot about responsibility lately, about what it means to take care of family, about who you can trust." Richard's smile flickered, just slightly. That's good, Dad. That's exactly what we're talking about here." "Is it?" I stood up slowly. "Before I sign anything, there are some people I'd like you to meet." Richard's expression shifted, the first crack in his confidence. "People? What people? Dad, this is a private family matter."
The kitchen door swung open. Tommy walked in first. He stood by the entrance to the living room, arms crossed, face hard as stone. Richard went pale. What is he doing here? "I invited him," I said. "He's my son." "Dad, we've talked about this. Tommy is—" "Careful, Richard." My voice was cold now. No more frail old man. Think very carefully about the next words that come out of your mouth. Frank Delgado stepped out of the kitchen next, 70 years old but still built like a linebacker. He positioned himself by the front door, casual but unmistakable. "Richard, Vicky," I said. "This is Frank Delgado, my partner of 15 years, retired like me, but once a federal agent, always a federal agent." Richard's face went from pale to gray. "Federal? What is this?" "And Charlie Henderson is on the back porch. You remember Charlie, our neighbor for 30 years. He saw you arrive. He's going to remember everything that happens here today." I reached under my chair and pulled out a folder, set it on the coffee table next to Richard's power of attorney form. Now, let's talk about what's really been going on. The room was dead silent. Sandra Chen looked between Richard and me, clearly confused. This wasn't what she'd signed up for. Vicky was gripping her purse, eyes darting toward the door. Frank Delgado smiled at her pleasantly. Richard tried to recover. "Dad, I don't know what Tommy's been telling you, but—" "Tommy hasn't told me anything." I opened the folder. He didn't have to. I pulled out the first document. "These are my bank statements from the past 5 years. 17 withdrawals totaling $73,000. All with my signature." I held up one of the slips. "Except I didn't sign them." Richard's mouth opened. Nothing came out. "I spent 30 years analyzing forged documents, son. Did you really think I wouldn't recognize my own handwriting? The pressure on the R is wrong. The loop on the W is too tight.
I set the slip down. Amateur work. Sloppy. I've put men in federal prison for better forgeries than this. Dad, I can explain. Can you explain this too? I pulled out the printed emails. These are from your laptop, the one you left here last year. You forgot to log out of your email. I read aloud. The house should be worth at least $1.2 million in this market. Once we get POA, we can list it by summer. Vicky made a small sound, like a trapped animal. Just need to keep Tommy away so he doesn't interfere, I continued. Dad already thinks he's a deadbeat. I made sure of that. I looked up at Richard. 10 years. You spent 10 years poisoning me against your brother, telling me he was using me, telling me he was waiting for me to die. And the whole time, you were the one stealing from me. You were the one planning to take everything. Richard stood up abruptly. This is ridiculous. You can't prove any of this. Those emails could be fake. The signatures could be… Sit down, Richard.
Something in my voice made him stop. I spent 30 years as a United States Postal Inspector, not a mailman, an inspector. I investigated fraud, forgery, and financial crimes for the federal government. I put 63 criminals behind bars. I let that sink in. You thought I was just a senile old man who couldn't tell what was happening in his own house. You forgot what I did for a living. Richard sat back down, slowly, like his legs had given out. There's one more thing. I pulled out the last document from the folder. I had a friend of mine, someone who still works in financial investigations, do a little digging into your affairs, Richard. I was curious why you were so desperate for my money. I slid the paper across the table. $340,000 in credit card debt. Second mortgage on your house in Charlotte that Vicky doesn't know about. 2 investment accounts completely drained. You're not just greedy, Richard. You're broke. You needed my money to survive. Vicky snatched the paper, read it, looked at Richard with an expression I recognized, the look of a woman realizing she married a fraud. Richard, you told me we were fine. You told me the accounts were solid. What is this? Vicky, it's not what it looks like. It's exactly what it looks like, I said. Your husband has been living beyond his means for years. The corner office, the expensive suits, the Mercedes, all smoke and mirrors. He was planning to pay off his debts with my savings, with the sale of this house, with everything Helen and I built over 40 years. Tommy stepped forward. His voice was quiet, but it cut through the room like a blade. You know what the worst part is, Richard? Richard couldn't meet his eyes. The worst part isn't the money. It's not the stealing. It's what you did to Dad and me. Tommy's voice shook with 10 years of suppressed hurt. I spent a decade wondering what I did wrong, wondering why Dad suddenly stopped trusting me, stopped inviting me to dinner, started looking at me like I was a criminal. He pointed at Richard. It was you. The whole time, it was you. You made him hate me so you could steal from him without interference. You sacrificed our relationship, my relationship with my own father, just to cover your tracks. Richard finally looked up. His eyes were red. Tommy, don't. Tommy's voice was hard now. Don't you dare apologize. Don't you dare pretend you're sorry. You knew exactly what you were doing. For 10 years, you knew. The room was silent. Sandra Chen quietly closed her briefcase. I think I should go, she murmured. Good idea, Frank said from his position by the door. Though you might want to stick around. The police are going to want statements from everyone.
Police? Richard shot to his feet. You called the police? Not yet. I pulled out my phone. Patricia, we're ready.
Patricia Webb's voice came through on speaker. Mr. Chambers, I've been listening to everything. Based on what I've heard, combined with the documentation you've provided, I'm prepared to file criminal charges for forgery, fraud, and financial exploitation of an elderly adult. These are felony charges in North Carolina. Vicky stood up abruptly. I had nothing to do with this. Those emails, that was all Richard. I didn't know about the forgeries. I didn't... Ma'am, Patricia's voice was calm, your emails are also in the file. You were a willing participant in the planning. I'd strongly suggest you speak with your own attorney. Vicky looked at Richard with pure disgust. I want a divorce, she said. I want a divorce, and I want it on record that I'm cooperating fully. Richard reached for her arm. Vicky, please. She yanked away from him. Don't touch me. I stood up and walked toward my son. Not Tommy, Richard. I stopped about 3 feet away from him, close enough to see the sweat on his forehead, close enough to see the fear in his eyes. Your mother's last words to me were about you and Tommy. Did you know that? Richard shook his head slightly. She said, take care of our boys, both of them. She loved you, Richard. Despite everything, she loved you. She would have given you anything. I felt my eyes sting, but I kept going. But she's not here anymore. And I've spent the last 4 years watching you try to destroy this family. Watching you turn me against the son who actually stayed. Watching you steal from me and lie to my face. I stepped back. Your mother wouldn't recognize you. Neither do I. Richard's face crumpled. For a moment, just a moment, I saw the boy he used to be. The boy who used to run on this beach, laughing, before ambition and greed twisted him into someone else. Dad, please, I made mistakes. I know I did, but I'm still your son. Please. You stopped being my son the day you forged my signature. The day you decided I was just an obstacle between you and a paycheck. I shook my head slowly. Get out of my house. Dad, get out of my house and don't come back. Frank Delgado opened the front door. Richard looked around the room, at Tommy, stone-faced, at Vicky, already calling someone on her phone, at me, the father he'd underestimated for the last time. He had nothing left to say. He walked out. Vicky followed a moment later, without a word to him. Through the window, I watched them get in their separate cars. The Mercedes pulled away first, then Vicky's rental. I didn't feel satisfaction, not exactly. I just felt tired. Tommy put his hand on my shoulder. You okay, Dad? I nodded slowly. Yeah, I think I am. That was 6 months ago.
Richard was charged with forgery and elder financial abuse. The case is still working its way through the courts, but Patricia says he's looking at 2 to 5 years. His firm fired him the day the charges went public. Last I heard, he's living in a studio apartment in Charlotte, waiting for his trial. Vicky filed for divorce the week after the confrontation. She's cooperating with prosecutors in exchange for reduced charges. I almost feel sorry for her. Almost. The credit card companies came after Richard for the $340,000. He had to sell the Mercedes? The lake house he'd been dreaming about? Never going to happen. Some people might say I was too hard on him, that I should have given him another chance, that family is family, no matter what. But here's what I've learned in 72 years. Some betrayals are too deep. Some choices can't be undone. Richard didn't make a mistake. He made a decision. Every forged signature, every lie about Tommy, every dollar he stole, those were choices, and choices have consequences. I've made my peace with it. The beach house is still mine, for now, but I've already signed the papers to transfer it to Tommy when I'm gone. Patricia set it up in a trust that Richard can never touch. The house that Helen loved,
The house I built with my own hands. It's going to someone who actually deserves it. Tommy's here every Sunday now. Sometimes he brings over fish he caught that morning. Sometimes we just sit on the porch and watch the water. Last Sunday, we watched the sunrise together. The sky turned from black to deep blue to brilliant orange, just like it did that last morning with Helen. Tommy was in the chair beside me, her chair. First time I let anyone sit there since she died. "You know," I said, "your mother used to love this view." Tommy nodded. "I remember. She'd want you to have this place. She always knew you were the one who'd take care of it." He didn't say anything, just reached over and squeezed my arm. We sat there until the sun was fully up. Two men who'd lost 10 years to lies, finally sitting together again. I wasted a decade pushing my son away. I'll never get those years back. But I'm going to spend whatever time I have left making it up to him. Helen, if you're up there, I finally got it right. If you're watching this and you have a family member who's turning people against you, who's telling lies to isolate you, who's making you doubt people you should trust, I want you to know something. Trust your gut. I spent 30 years catching con artists, and I still fell for the one at my own dinner table. It happens. It doesn't make you stupid, it makes you human. But when you finally see the truth, don't wait. Document everything. Talk to a lawyer. Protect yourself. Because the people who are supposed to love you don't always deserve your trust. And loyalty isn't something you're born into. It's something you earn. Richard forgot that. Tommy never did.
If you've been through something like this, a family member who manipulated you, stole from you, tried to turn you against someone who actually cared, I'd love to hear your story in the comments. Sometimes it helps just knowing you're not alone. And if you know someone who's going through this, share this video with them. Let them know there's hope. I share stories like this every week here on John's Revenge Stories. Real people who stood up for themselves when everyone counted them out. If this story meant something to you, hit that subscribe button and the bell so you don't miss the next one. And if you think Richard got exactly what he deserved, hit that like button. It really helps more people find these stories. Take care of yourselves, friends. And remember, I spent 30 years as a federal investigator, and my own son thought he could con me. He forgot one thing. I wrote the book on catching liars. I just never thought I'd have to use it on my own blood. I'll see you in the next one.